Animals. Everybody loves them, whether you love to pet them or eat them or both at the same time. Animals are as a part of human life as the sun above. But what happens when the animals we love so much decide to bend the rules of reality? And then we take a look at the story of a man who gets his hands on one of the most bizarre psychoactive substances on the planet. When he sits back in his bed and takes a long bong rip of some salvia, he thinks he's just going to have a groovy time. Instead, his journey through time and space may have consequences for all of us. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio.
Actually, I'm a lot freaked out.
It's showtime! Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I was Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. You guys are having a great day too. I'm excited. I haven't talked about this a single time on this show. I'm surprised. In a couple days, I'm going to be watching Beetlejuice. I'm a big Beetlejuice fan. We actually call ourselves the Juicers. We love Beetlejuice and injecting steroids into our buttocks. The Juicers. No, I'm super excited. Beetlejuice. Cannot wait. But someone who has already seen it, someone who has all the spoilers, so he's not allowed to talk for the rest of the episode, coming into Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Castro T. Woohoo, yeah! He's walking on in with a Zagnut, doing little Beetlejuice dances. Yeah, dance. Castro T's like, I never saw that movie. What are you talking about? Never even saw the first one. Castro T made a donation during our 6th anniversary live stream special, which was, if you think about it, which was June, wasn't it? I think it was back in June. What month are we in now? September? Like I said, I found this list on the ground that had some unscratched out names, so Castro T, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through live streams or through Patreon or the merch store, it's totally fine. It really is. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Castro T, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm going to toss you the keys. Ooh, this is a new one I just came up with. Castro T, I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to a speedboat, and everyone get aboard the Wabbit water skis. This would be dope. We're all going to hold on to this little bar and put these Wabbit water skis on our feet. Castro T, fire up that bad boy. Take us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command and water ski us all the way out to Oregon, the same state. Ooh, wee, wee. I didn't think of a sound effect. What does a water ski sound like? Wee! We're water skiing around Oregon. We're headed out to Oregon. Specifically, we're headed to Cottage Grove, Oregon. I don't know where that's at. You know, I'm up in Hood River, Oregon. Cottage Grove, Oregon. It's June 1996. And as we're hanging out in Cottage Grove, we're going to meet a young woman, near Cottage Grove, we're going to meet a young woman named Lynn Johnson. She's currently traveling south of Cottage Grove, driving down the freeway, when all of a sudden, she gets a feeling that she's being followed. She looks in her rear view, she doesn't see any cars behind her. She's kind of looking around, she goes, it's just kind of like this instinctual feeling, like how some people can tell when someone's staring at them. I can't do that. I've never been able to tell when someone's staring at me, but a lot of people can. She feels like she's being followed, and she's kind of looking around. She looks over, and she sees something running alongside of her car. Now, she's hitting like 60, 70 miles an hour. She's headed down the freeway. Whatever this thing is, it's actually also running about 65 miles an hour as well. She said it was about 4 feet tall and was the size of a deer. I thought deer were kind of taller than that, but maybe like the width of a deer. So it's 4 feet tall, the size of a deer. It had deer-like legs. So you go, it's a deer. Oh, it's just one of those old deers that can run 65 miles an hour. That's not paranormal, Jason. Go on to the next story. a deer-sized, deer-legged animal, possibly a deer, but let's keep going, right, is running alongside of her car, middle of the day as well. She said it had deer-like legs, but she knew it wasn't a deer, not only because it was running so fast, but it was running on two legs. So this deer-shaped, deer-sized, deer-legged creature, about 4 feet tall, was running next to her car on two legs. And if that wasn't odd enough, if that doesn't make you grab the steering wheel and go, whoa, and like start swerving in the opposite direction, right? I hope your first instinct, you're like, oh, there's Bigfoot, you're running him over. Hope your first instinct when you see a mysterious creature from beyond the veil isn't to slam into it, but she's looking over at this thing. It shocks her, obviously. You don't expect to see something like this. It's on two legs. It's 4 feet tall, running down the road. But before she can really react to it, before she can really take in what she's seeing, it jumps up in the air. And at that point, two gray, leathery wings, but also feathered. So feathered, leathery gray wings sprout out of this creature's back. And then it flew up into the sky and began flying north. You go, okay, what's the weirdest part of that story? I think would be my first question. So is it that you have an animal that looks like a deer? And she didn't even say like it had the head of a deer. But it was deer-sized with deer legs. The fact that it was running on two legs? Is that the weird part? Well, deers sometimes walk on two legs. Is it the speed of it? Or is it the wings? Like, yes, Jason, you dolt, of course. It's the wings that magically appeared from nowhere. That's the weirdest part of it. Why'd you spend all that time asking us? The whole time you're shouting, the wings! The wings! People hanging out next to you, they're like, what podcast are they listening to? You're all the wings, you idiot! The wings! So, the wings that sprout out of this animal's back. But there's even one more weird detail. When Lynn told this story, it was originally posted in the Western Bigfoot Society newsletter. I got it from thinkaboutitdocs.com. But they got it from the Western Bigfoot Society newsletter. She said that when the wings appeared, they just seemed to kind of unfurl or shoot out of its back. The wings were each only about 1.5 feet long. So that's like a Subway sandwich and a half. And she said that it was... the wings did not in any way look big enough to provide flight for this creature. Like if you have something that's the size of a deer, a Subway sandwich and a half isn't enough of a wingspan to give it any sort of lift and fly away. That's one of the things I love about the paranormal is a lot of it just does not make sense. Outside of the existence of cryptids and ghosts and UFOs, even when you break it down, just physics-wise, these small wings, I mean, forget the fact they appeared out of nowhere, forget the fact this thing was running 65 miles an hour, even when the wings appeared, it still doesn't make sense. If they had these big, beautiful wings, 6 foot, 8 foot wingspan, and it flew off, I mean, I'm not saying that would be less interesting. It was like, oh, that's kind of boring. But you know what I mean? Like the fact that the wings that allowed this thing to fly away, they shouldn't be able to function like that. Again, it's just another reminder of how weird, how truly bizarre the world of the paranormal actually is. But we're not done yet. Castro T, why don't you take us... Let's all hop aboard the Jason Jalopy as Castro drives us. We're leaving behind Oregon. Why don't you drive us out to Puerto Rico? Nice leisurely drive out to Puerto Rico. It's January 14th, 1998, 5:30 in the morning. And here, we're going to meet a man named Carlos David Vargas Montalvo. And he works at the University of Puerto Rico. Specifically, he works at the cow ranch on campus. You know, a lot of colleges and school, high school, around here we have them in high schools. California, we have them in high schools too. A lot of farming programs. In Sacramento, we have the Future Farmers of America, 4-H, all that stuff. People are working on cow science at school. People go, hey, I want a bachelor's degree and I want it in cow stuff. And the dean's like, go ahead. Here, go hang out with these cows. Hang out with these cows for 4 years. Over there's Professor Moo. He'll teach you everything you need to know. So he's working at the cow ranch on campus, which would be kind of cool, because then you would never be late. You'd never be late, because there's always a rooster right in your face going, cock-a-doodle-doo. You won't have to worry about stuff if you were like, hey, man, I need to get across campus really, really quick. Oh no, what am I going to do? You hop on a horse and you're just galloping a bunch of people getting trampled to death. You're like, but at least I'm here on time. You're like, whoops, sorry, this is a Tuesday. I'm not supposed to be in this class today. Riding your horse back to the cow part of the college would be kind of tough. If you're ever hungry, you're just like, yummy, 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 raw milk. It seems like a pretty cool program. If you don't know what you're going to major in, maybe cow science. At this point, he's at this cow ranch on campus, and part of his job is, at this time in the morning, he rounds up the cows from the feeding lot. He goes, cows, come on, it's enough feeding for you. The oats have run dry. Come on over here, cows. And the cows have been trained to do this. When it's time to leave the feeding lot, they line up. You call to them, and they make this line. They always do that. But this time, the cows have all lined up, but Carlos sees a cow near the back of the feeding lot, just sitting down. They're not moving. Carlos is like, cow, you get over here. The feeding time's done. So's the sitting time. It's time to come over here, get in line. The cow won't move. Carlos starts walking towards the cow, and he's like, yo, cow, dude, you gotta go. It's like, now it's time to get in line. And as he's getting closer, the cow's not moving. He's starting to think, oh, you know, maybe I'm a jerk. Maybe the cow's sore or sick or hurt, and I'm yelling at him to move. Maybe he has like a little like thorn in his hoof or something like that. Maybe he got scared, and he's like having an anxiety attack. He's walking over to the cow, but he keeps calling, dude, come on, get up, buddy. I'm sorry if you stepped on that bumblebee, but we gotta go. And as he gets closer and closer, he continues to call out to this cow, and it's just sitting there. But then all of a sudden, the cow begins to twist its body one way, and then twist back the other way. And begins to convulse. He's watching this cow have a seizure. Its body is just twisting and turning in every direction. He can see the muscles tensing up and then relaxing and then tensing up. It must be horrific to see a cow have a seizure. I've seen a couple of humans have seizures, and they weren't 800 pounds. They weren't 800 pounds and had cloven feet. He's watching this cow have a seizure, and its body's twisting and turning, and he's like, oh, dude, like, this is crazy. I feel sorry for that cow. And Carlos is watching this when all of a sudden, two huge, massive wings unfurl from this cow's body. And that's when he realizes, like, dude, it's 5:30 in the morning. 5:30 in the morning, man. This guy is, I know farmers and stuff like that wake up early, but I mean, he's probably been awake for maybe an hour or two. He's like, what? These two huge wings unfurl, and that's when he realizes it's not a cow. What he's looking at is this massive bird-like creature that's sitting on the ground. And its wings unfurl, this massive wingspan reaches out, and then those wings start to flap, and the creature shoots off into the morning sky. Took off at high speeds towards Laguna Cartagena, which is a nearby lake/wildlife refuge. Carlos reportedly was in shock for the next several hours. And I would assume change is major. He's like, oh, I'll do electrical engineering. There's no monsters in that, I believe. That was originally reported by Wilson Sosa in Terra Club's OVNI, which I believe is a newsletter or magazine. And that was also reported by ThinkAboutItDocs.com. ThinkAboutItDocs.com, we haven't covered it in a long time. I still keep going through their archives looking for great stuff. They're as far as I'm concerned, the number one resource for humanoid and UFO encounters. A lot of great stuff. And then, and then things like this. Because you wonder what these things are. And they both have wings. That's really the only connection. But what's funny is that, so I have these two stories. I'd say I come across one maybe every 2 or 3 months. They're not super common, but they're by no means incredibly rare. Stories like this. Of creatures that look like other creatures who then sprout wings and fly away. I mean, it's really weird if you think about it. You go, oh, these are two weird stories. No, every couple months, I'll find one. It might be an older story like these were. Someone might have posted something recently. We actually did a story not too long ago. They didn't have wings, but we did stories about horses. That the one guy saw the two horses that were sewn together as like the two heads and the two forefronts of the body, but they were sewn together as like this weird creature in the middle of this prairie. I'll see if I can find that episode, but every so often we'll find these kind of glitches in the animal kingdom, or however you want to classify these. Are these cryptids? The bird creature might be more classified as a cryptid. Like it was disguised as a cow. And what's funny about that story is that, listen, I'm not an agricultural guy. I'm not an outdoorsy guy. For me to see a large, we'll assume the color. For me to see a large white shape at the end of a feeding lot full of cows at 5:30 in the morning, and for me to look at that and go, oh, that's a cow. And I'm looking at that from across the lot, and then I start walking towards it, and I keep going, that's a cow, that's a cow. And then it turns out to be a giant bird. You go, well, Jason, you don't really know what a cow looks like laying down at 5:30 in the morning anyways. And that's true. This guy does. This wasn't his first day working there. He's been doing this shift. He's been doing this job. He calls the cows. They line up. He knows exactly how it works. So for him to be fooled by something at 5:30 in the morning across the feeding lot, and for him to begin walking closer and closer to it, and the whole time thinking, oh, that is a cow. It's not responding to my calls. It must be sick. It might be injured. It's the same thing when I report a UFO versus an airline pilot reports a UFO. They're always looking up in the sky. It does hold more weight. So it's interesting that he was deceived until he got close enough. And you have to wonder if... It's funny because these two stories, the only thing that does really connect them are wings. I feel like I have to keep going back and forth between them. It is weird if you think about it, because this could be a cryptid, an avian cryptid that does disguise itself as a cow almost perfectly. And it may even feed on cows or feed on livestock. And if you saw it in the pen, you wouldn't think anything of it. And it's possible its mimicry is so good even other cows don't notice something's wrong. And this could be a biological creature that has excelled at mimicking its food source. So this is a story where we could actually go, this is an unknown creature, but it does fit the laws of physics. We know animals can mimic other animals. We know animals can actually physically disguise themselves as their environment or as delicious prey for their prey. So this one does have those markers that we go, this could actually be a real undiscovered creature in the area, as opposed to the first one where it's running so fast. None of it would be possible in any sort of way that we know of a biological creature. So that is probably something paranormal, spiritual, interdimensional, something like that. This may be a living cryptid, a biological, would have a nesting place, may have offspring. so on and so forth. Interesting. I mean, again, like these types of events, and these are just run of the mill, right? These people aren't going to a haunted house. One woman's just driving down in the middle of the day. One guy's doing his job, and they encounter these things that science tells us neither one of them are real. Every animal that size has been discovered. It's nothing like that. Nothing can run that fast. Nothing can grow tiny wings and fly away. But we have these two witnesses minding their own business, stumble across this. And again, like I said, maybe once... I mean, I do read more of these accounts than I think most people. Like, I spend hours a day reading this stuff. But even then, the fact that I come across one of these stories every 2 months or so means that there's something going on with this particular phenomenon. Fascinating stuff, though. Fascinating stuff. It is interesting that I come across stories like this maybe one every 2 months. So there is something to this phenomenon. Animals glitching out. Animals not doing what they should be doing. Or animals that appear as other animals, but then are something else. Castro, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world famous Carpenter copter. Everyone climb on board. We're leaving behind Puerto Rico. We're waving goodbye. Carlos is still, he's like, I'm still freaking out, bro. I'm still freaking out. We disguise the Carpenter copter as a big bird just to freak him out a little bit more. We're leaving behind Puerto Rico. That was kind of mean. We're leaving behind Puerto Rico. Castro, why don't you fly us all the way out to a house in the suburbs? We walk into this house. I have a key. I have a key to every house in every story we've ever told, except for the true crime ones, except for the unsolved murders. I don't have those keys. I let myself in. I go, hey guys, come on, we're gonna go in this house. We walk in this house, and it's a house, right? It's a normal looking house. Living room, kitchen. There's this hallway that goes back to like the bedrooms and the bathrooms, stuff like that. Walking around, and I sit in a chair. I go ahead, guys, have a seat on the couch. Go ahead, take a seat on the couch. You're sitting on the couch. There's a lamp. There's a table, a television set, ceiling fan on the ceiling. And we're just kind of sitting there, and I go, it's a pretty chill place, right? Pretty cool place. But what if I told you that where we are sitting may actually make you reconsider everything you know about not only the physical world around us, but the very thoughts that surround us. I take a long pause. You're like, was that supposed to be profound? I'm like, yes, it was. Let's go, guys. Take another look around before we leave this place. Pretty normal looking place. You're like, yeah, it's pretty normal. And then I turn to the camera and I wink. Ding! Little do they know, this place is far beyond normal. Or is it? Is it? I turn a leprechaun, apparently. I do a little jump, buckle my shoes, click my heels. We walk out. Now we're going to go to a different house. We're going to meet a guy. We don't have his exact name. We're going to call him Jerry. But Jerry is sitting in his bedroom, and he's holding his bong. And it's loaded up with some salvia. Now, if you're not familiar with what salvia is, trust me, you're about to get a crash course on what this drug can do. It's a drug, basically. If you're smoking it in a bong, I know you can smoke tobacco in a bong, but I guess that's a drug too. If you don't know what salvia is, you'll learn very quickly. And so will Jerry, because at this point, Jerry has never smoked salvia. While he's not completely inexperienced with drugs, he doesn't own a bong. His buddy had recently smoked some salvia and been like, Jerry, bro, you gotta try this out, dude. This stuff is the best. And Jerry's like, okay, I will try this drug I've never tried before. My buddy said it was pretty good. Jerry has a little salvia that his buddy gave him. He has it in his bong and he lights it up. Jerry takes a 15-second long rip of this salvia. 15 seconds. Pull out your stopwatch. He's ripping this thing on this bong. When he exhales out this smoke, within seconds, Jerry feels himself slide out of his body. Jerry feels everything that's human about him just slip right out of his physical form, and then flash! The next thing Jerry realizes, and that's in kind of air quotes, because he doesn't know. It's a very, very interesting story because he has a limited base of information at the time, but he's thought about it since then, and he's trying to navigate the two. But the next thing he knows, the next thing he realizes, is that Jerry is now a ceiling fan. But he goes, I don't remember being human. He said, I'm a ceiling fan. I'm a ceiling fan in this house, and I've always been a ceiling fan. I knew something was wrong, and I knew that I had to escape, but I didn't know escape from what, or what was wrong, or how to escape, or why. Because he was a ceiling fan. And he had always been a ceiling fan. He knew that. He knew I'm a ceiling fan. And he also knew that he was going to watch everything that happened. That was kind of his reasoning. That this ceiling fan was there to observe. But at the same time, he can't comprehend a lot of what he's going to observe. Because he's a ceiling fan. He then says, which this quote really sets up a lot of stuff, right? He turns into the ceiling fan, and he says, quote, the first year... Okay, so he's going to be a ceiling fan for a while, and this is something that happens with salvia. When you smoke it, you're generally high for a couple minutes, tops. But you can have a trip that lasts far, far longer than that. So he takes this rip, now he's a ceiling fan. In the first year of his life of a ceiling fan, 365 days includes this. He says, there's a balding man who lives at this house. He's slightly overweight. He had gray hair. And he was married to a pregnant blonde woman who spent a lot of the time walking around the house naked. Every night, the man and the woman would sit on the couch and watch television. And usually, during their favorite show, they'd have sex. On the couch you were sitting on, by the way. They'd have sex. They'd have sex on that couch. And Jerry's just a ceiling fan watching all of this. Jerry says, I never learned their names. And even when they would talk, he goes, have you ever seen those videos? And I'll put one in the show notes, but they have those videos on YouTube of what English sounds like to someone who doesn't speak English. He goes, that's really what it felt like. He's fluent in English, but when he was a ceiling fan, because he's a ceiling fan, the ceiling fan doesn't know English. So he would hear these conversations that just seemed like random, like a random jarbled mess. He goes, every so often, though, I could pick out a particular thought. Something would make sense. He goes, one thing that he did pick up on was they didn't have a lot of money. This couple didn't have a lot of money. They didn't really spend a lot of time outside of the house. I mean, other than when one had to go to work or one went shopping or whatever. He said normally there was always at least one of them there But yeah, he would hear them kind of complain about not having a lot of money, stressful, paying bills and all that. He goes, that's really one of the key things that he couldn't comprehend as the ceiling fan. Well, she's pregnant, and after the new year passes, that first year, after New Year's Day, both him and her, the husband and the wife, are gone for 3 days. And Jerry's just this ceiling fan in this empty house. With Salvia, there's no time jumps. By the way, it's a tick, 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 tick. It's every minute of every day. So for 3 days, he felt every minute sitting in this empty house as a ceiling fan. But after those 3 days, they come back and they have a baby boy with them. And Jerry sees them walk into the living room holding this baby boy, this new addition to the family. Jerry watches this little boy begin to develop. He's a baby. He's a toddler. He's getting ready for his first day of school. Jerry's observing all of this every minute of every day of every month of every year, watching this family go about their daily lives and watching this little boy grow up. Jerry said the boy seemed to be, he just doesn't know he's a ceiling fan. These are things that he can kind of remember back now that he's human and can type stuff up. But at the time he's a ceiling fan, what he's figured out retroactively is that the boy seemed to suffer from autism and definitely had a speech impediment. He had a hard time learning how to speak correctly. He goes, I would watch the boy kind of silently mouth the words and then say those same words out loud. Watching this little boy, needs a little bit extra help, but sees this little boy doing what he needs to do to get over this speech impediment. Jerry says the dad got older and fatter and balder. Jerry said the mom let herself go. That's the terminology he used, let herself go. But Jerry, as he's watching this boy grow up, he said he was handsome. He was a very, very handsome boy with curly blonde hair. This family is just living their life. And the only way that Jerry can keep track of time is by counting the birthdays. Because other than that, he's just this ceiling fan. And I should also say now, I don't know if you know a lot about ceiling fans, they're immobile. He said there was a hallway. He goes, I don't know what was down the hallway. I assume it was their bedrooms. I assume it was their bathroom. He goes, but I could really only see what a ceiling fan could see. So when the family would get ready for bed and they'd walk down the hallway, I don't know what that part of the house looked like. I don't know what the outside of the house looked like. I don't know what anything outside of the living room and a little bit of the kitchen looked like because I was a ceiling fan. He's counting the birthdays. He's watching this boy grow up minute by minute, day by day, month by month. The boy has now turned 15 years old. Jerry has been a ceiling fan for 15 years. Year 15, he sees the boy and his mother talking. And the mother tells the child, I have to tell you something, son. Grandma died. Grandma's dead. Jerry, as the ceiling fan, he's never met Grandma. Grandma's never come over to the house. In fact, he starts to think no one really ever even talked about Grandma. But the mom is sitting down with the boy and says, Grandma's died, and she begins to explain how death works. And there's no coming back from it. We're going to prepare a ceremony, have her put in a grave. We're going to go to the graveyard. All of that, the process of life and death. And she's explaining that to her son, and she's letting him know, you will not see Grandma again. We won't be able to see her, and we won't be able to see her again, son, because she's passed on. She's dead. But as Jerry is sitting up there on the ceiling, and he's hearing this conversation, all of a sudden, the mother's voice starts to echo and change. She begins repeating certain phrases over and over again, and they're becoming darker and more demonic. She's saying,
Grandma's never coming back.
You will never see Grandma.
You will never see Grandma again.
You will never see
She's
Grandma
gone.
again.
She's gone.
Then everything snaps back to normal. Her voice returns to normal. The echo is gone. The mother simply gets up off the couch and walks down the hallway to rooms unknown. That was really the first time that Jerry, as the ceiling fan, experienced anything paranormal outside of becoming a ceiling fan. This moment was the first time that something truly unusual has happened in this house. And it would fill Jerry with an intense fear, a panic. Because he didn't understand what this was. He doesn't know why this moment, out of all the moments, it became so dark and evil. It became twisted and corrupted. It became demonic. He said that same year 15, one day Mom went into the kitchen and she grabbed 3 oranges. And then she walked into the living room, put the 3 oranges on the floor, and then left the room. Now Jerry is looking down where these oranges are on the floor, and they begin to spin. They begin to turn and twist and spin until all 3 oranges are spinning around in a circle. And then the mother begins walking down the hallway to re-enter the living room, and the oranges stop. They completely freeze. They're laying motionless on the floor. And the mother walks over, picks up the 3 oranges, puts them back in the kitchen. Then one day, during year 15, Jerry is a ceiling fan. He's hanging out on the ceiling. And the father walks into the living room and flips a switch, turning the ceiling fan on for the first time in 15 years. For the first time since Jerry has become the ceiling fan, he begins to move. The blades of the ceiling fan slowly start revolving. Whoop. 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 And when they reach the 5th rotation, whoop, he feels himself float out of the ceiling fan, float out of the house, float into the sky, and then flash! Jerry is laying in bed in his house. Jerry is laying there in bed, and he said it took him 5 minutes to remember where he was and even who he was. He said, it's really interesting. He goes, I remember everything. And I could tell you everything. I could write down everything that happened in those 15 years, but it would be longer than the dictionary. Because I remember all of it. Every single minute of every single day, of every single month, of every single year, for 15 years. He said it for about 3 days afterwards, he was pretty messed up mentally. Because again, when it's interesting because he has two thought processes here. He has the ceiling fan where it was like, well, I'm a ceiling fan. But now back when he's Jerry, he thinks about things that happened. And he goes, the creepiest part was year 15. With the demonic voices and the weird stuff with the oranges. He goes, it was so bizarre, even outside of what he was experiencing before that. He goes, and especially the demonic voices terrified him. Like, once he shifted back to human, thinking about that still really, really scares him. Like, what was going on? Why was that moment so dark and evil? He said, moral of the story, don't do salvia. Which is what you hear from a lot of people who do salvia. But he did experience 15 years of existence as a ceiling fan because he took a ripping hit of salvia, a drug he had never tried before. It's so funny because, see, here's the interesting thing about this story. It was posted online by someone going by the name Park Psychological 738. We've talked about salvia in the past. I'll put those episodes in the show notes. I think we've just kind of really talked about it in one episode, but I've had two close friends of mine do salvia. One of them, she brought it over for me to do. This was a long time ago. She's like, bro, you got to hit this. You got to hit the salvia stuff, dude. Yeah, she came over and she was like, yeah, dude, you got to hit this. And she took listen, we're good friends. We knew each other in high school. We've known each other for years, decades at this point. But she came over and she's like, yo, let me hit it first. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I go, I've never even heard of this before. Before I ingest this substance I've never heard before. Yeah, sure, you go ahead and do it. She'd gotten it from a friend. And she smoked it. And then she sat on my couch and laughed for like 45 seconds straight. And then she looked at me and she goes, do not do salvia. Do not do this. I'm not even going to let you do it. And I was like, oh. Okay, I mean, I'll take your word for it. You did just trip out. And I was like, what did you see when you did it? And she was like, having a hard time to explain it. But it was nowhere near the level of these types of trips. Now, I got another buddy of mine. Talked about him a couple times on the show. It's my boy, Billy. Now, my boy, Billy, he smokes salvia. And I always love hearing people's drug stories and stuff like that. And he was, he did all sorts of stuff. He did all sorts of drugs that I would never even touch, right? And we were hanging out one day, and he goes, dude, I hit some salvia the other day. I started laughing. I was like, dude, how was it? He's like, it was the worst. It was the worst. And I'll be honest, my buddy, his drug of choice was meth, right? He did a lot of meth. He smoked weed, and stuff like that, but that was his drug of choice, was meth. Whatever, we hang out. I don't do it. I hate that drug. I hate it. But, I'm not going to not hang out with my buddy because he does it. We're hanging out, and he's like, yo, I hit some salvia. And I was like, this had to been like, at this point, maybe 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I was like, how was it? And he goes, I hated it. I'll never do it again. And I start laughing. I go, well, what happened? And he goes, well, I was outside of my house. He goes, I sat there. You always get it from somebody. He goes, I loaded up the pipe and I hit it. And the next thing I knew, I was a brick. He said that he was this brick. And then all of a sudden he realized that he was a brick in an endless wall of bricks. He said from the left side and to the right side, it was just brick, this huge, massive brick wall, as far as the eye could see. And he said, my head was the brick. Like, had my body, but my head was the brick. And I didn't want to be a brick anymore, so I took off running. And that's what he did in real life. He's flying down, running as fast as he can down Hazel Avenue, screaming, I'm a brick. Now, however long the trip lasted, in real life it lasted, 45 seconds a minute or something like that. And he was all out of breath and stuff like that. And he stopped being a brick. And he told me that. I'm laughing. He's like, it's not that funny, dude. I could have got ran over by a car. I was like, well, it's kind of funny because you didn't. A couple of years later, he stabbed a man. Killed a man. Went to prison. He's still in prison. And you think about that imagery, right? An endless sea of bricks. A wall as far as the eye can see. And in a way, it's like, was that a prophetic, vision? I mean, what is more representational of a prison than the walls that surround it? The bars, sure. And that whole idea of institutionalization. You go in and you're just this one of a million. A number, an endless sea of convicts. I mean, again, he could have just been tripping out. We've talked about Salvia before on the show. I've probably told that story about Billy before as well, but we talked about Salvia before on the show. There was the guy who took it and he became paint on the side of a barn for 70 years. And even he says every day, every minute, every hour, I was paint on the side of a barn. I experienced 70 years worth of memories. This is the interesting thing about this. There's two ways we can look at this. We've got to wrap this up. The episode's already going long. One is this gentleman, Jerry, and the guy who was the paint on the barn. And again, these stories are not the off ones. A lot of people who do Salvia have these huge time lapse moments where they experience an eternity in just a couple of seconds. But they have to kind of reconcile, and I guess this kind of dovetails with everything I want to say. Here's my question. Was this a trip? Did he become a ceiling? And what I say is, was it a trip? Here's my question. Did he become a ceiling fan in a house with a family that doesn't exist and has never existed? Or is everything he experienced real? One is just a crazy drug trip hallucination thing, but imagine if a couple years from now he is walking down the street and he sees that 15-year-old boy as an adult. And he knows it's him. 100% recognizes him because he watched him grow up for 15 years. You would never know. You can never say with 100% certainty that this was all a hallucination. Because you would never know for certain that this family didn't really actually exist. Because he doesn't know their names. He didn't get a ton of information from them. He can barely comprehend what's going on. The fact that you could say, well, the oranges. Right, Jason? There's not a lot of places on Earth where the oranges twist. There could be elements in that last year, for sure, where he had those two creepy experiences. That was the connection between him and the ceiling fan starting to wear thin. But maybe, we cover paranormal stuff on this show. Oranges spinning on the ground would be the least weird thing we've covered in the past 6 years. Same thing with the guy who was at the barn. How does he know that's not really a barn that has actually existed? And there is a layer of paint on it. So he didn't hallucinate. He became something that's actually physical in this world. And then you really open it up to, well, what if it's not a family alive right now? What if he was a ceiling fan in a home from 2004? or 2032. Unless you had huge changes in technology, like if you were like 1972, you might be able to go, well, that was kind of weird. Everything, the carpets were different and the television was different and things like that. But it takes a long time for people to go, oh, we're going to get the biggest television set, the thinnest television set. We're going to get all of these smart. I have nothing smart in my place. If you teleported here, you probably would have, outside of my laptop, I think you'd have a hard time figuring out what decade you were in. As I look around, there's you could go, well, that Maxim Hometown Hotties poster was printed in 2003. So I know wherever I'm at is post 2003. But other than that, I have Deep Space Nine action figures. I almost feel like this is a trap for time travelers. They're like, what? What? There's nothing in here that gives it away that we're in the year 2024. You'd probably think you were in the early 2000s. So you don't even know, but I mean, we don't even know if it's a family that existed right in that moment. Because actually we know it wouldn't be, because the fact that in that short period of time, he was actually 15 years passed. So it could be, yeah, you would have no clue of what time period this happened in. You could maybe narrow it down to a 20-year gap. But is the family real? Because that changes everything. That changes everything. If this is a drug that you do and you hallucinate everything and it feels real, that's just a bizarre... I mean, that alone already is the connection between man and nature. The fact that a plant could evolve on Earth or be cultivated, I don't know, maybe they've taken different species and strains and made that. I don't know, I actually should have looked that up, history of Salvia, but you have a plant that can cause such chaos in the human brain. Already, that's just interesting enough. But imagine if out of all the psychoactive substances and all the deliriants, all of that, this one in particular, and not everybody, but some people, can actually keep you in this physical realm, but make you something else. Some people will take it and just laugh really hard and see people with funny faces. I don't think my friend was teleported to the funny face dimension. But is it possible that Jerry actually became a real ceiling fan in a real house that had real people experiencing a real life? Because if that's the case, if that even happened once on this drug, then it changes everything about everything. Like, you would look around and think, what in my house could be a drug user? And not even that, it could be a drug user 20 years from now. It changes everything about reincarnation. I don't think of a ceiling fan as having a personality or even having a place for a consciousness. Did Jerry's real life consciousness go into a ceiling fan for 15 years? How does a ceiling fan see or sense or hear? It just breaks all the rules of everything we know about reality and consciousness. Again, if the drug just causes a hallucination, which I'm sure most people would say, then it's just a hallucination. But if one of these stories is real, if one of these stories someone actually became this thing for all of this time, then I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm a little speechless, right? I can't even, my mind, now, first off, if you're just walking around your house with clothes for the rest of your time, you're like, I'm not walking around naked anymore. My couch cushion might be a person from the future. Don't say that out loud, you probably get taken to the loony bin, but do you treat the items in your house better because they might be somebody? Do you not do things that you would otherwise normally do because you're afraid that your trash can might actually be a guy? I mean, probably not, right? You're like, no, Jason, no one is going to hear that story and be like, oh no, I better change my light bulbs real quick. That might be a guy trapped in them. But you know what I mean? Like, if he actually went to somebody's house, which he'll never know whether or not that's true. And I think the conventional wisdom and other people who do this drug will be like, no, it was just a hallucination. But he'll never know the truth. Until, like I said, he runs into this kid or runs into the mom and dad. Or something concrete like that without evidence specifically showing it is real, because you can't have evidence proving it's not. You'd have to go, okay, visit every single house in the world to see if you can find this family. You can't do that. So until he has evidence for sure that it is true, because you can't prove that it's not, he will always wonder. And I'll always wonder. Is this a drug trip, or did he actually become a ceiling fan, and this family is a real family? Because one is a funny drug story about a guy who got too high and didn't research what he was doing, and the other one breaks all the rules we know about human consciousness and reality itself. And we'll never know for sure unless we have proof positive that it did happen. And that's extremely unlikely that he'll ever run into any of these people. But Jerry, like us, I think will always wonder if somewhere out there in the world there is a ceiling fan watching this family continue to grow. An empty ceiling fan. A lifeless ceiling fan. Looking down on this family. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today.